Rome, 31 years after Christ. Beneath the coffered ceilings of the imperial palace, 13 girls stand barefoot on marble colder than death. Their eyes are lowered, their wrists anointed with oils, their bodies draped in silk too sheer to be warm. No one speaks, not the guards, not the priestesses, not the mothers who wait behind heavy doors. Tonight is inspection night, a sacred rite, they say, for the purity of Rome, but every woman here knows the truth. This ritual does not sanctify the divine, it sanctifies the emperor. The summons arrived on a bronze tablet pressed with wax and the seal of the eagle. No one touched it, not at first. Valeria's mother stared at the script as if it were carved from fire. Her lips moved in silence, repeating the words before she dared speak them aloud. Then, carefully, she set it on the table between them and said only one thing: "The emperor has called." Valeria was 15. She had not yet married. She had not yet bled. Her life had been quiet, filled with garden walks, lyre lessons, and whispered prayers to Vesta. But the summons ended all of that. From the moment it was opened, she was no longer a daughter. She was an offering. Her father did not weep. He called it an honor. He said it would raise their family's status, that the gods had smiled upon their house. But Valeria had seen the look in her cousin's eyes when she returned last year, how she could not sit without flinching, how she flinched when men entered a room. The ritual had changed her, silenced her, erased something that would never return. That evening, Valeria was bathed in heated milk and rosewater. Her maids braided her hair with golden thread and wound it into the ceremonial crown of the Vestal maidens, though she was no Vestal. A priestess arrived before dawn. Her voice was gentle, rehearsed, but her eyes never met Valeria's. She spoke of purity, of duty, of the sanctity of being chosen. But Valeria could smell the fear under her perfume. They said the ritual had existed since the time of Romulus, that it was sacred, that once a year, girls of noble blood were inspected for signs of divine favor, beauty, symmetry, restraint. Some were selected to serve the gods, others were returned. All were changed. Before she left, her mother gave her a small pendant carved ivory shaped like a dove. "Keep it beneath your tongue," she whispered. "Do not let them take your words." Valeria did not understand what she meant, not fully, but she obeyed. As she was led into the litter, veiled in violet silk and silence, she looked back only once. Her mother stood in the doorway, head bowed, fingers trembling. That was the moment Valeria understood. This was not a rite, it was a transaction, and her body was the price. They dressed her in silence. 4 women entered the chamber just after dawn, their faces veiled, their movements practiced. None spoke, none smiled. Valeria stood as they instructed, lifting her arms, turning her face, allowing them to paint her skin with crushed lotus and myrrh. Her hair, dark and long, was braided tightly and coiled into a circlet that sat low at her neck. Over her shoulders, they draped the ceremonial stola woven from imported silk, dyed deep amethyst, trimmed in golden laurel leaves. It did not belong to her. Nothing she wore did. The sandals placed on her feet had soles that had never touched earth. Even the perfume, sharp and cloying, smelled like someone else's breath. When they finished, she looked like a statue, a girl carved for worship or sacrifice. As the final layer was arranged, one of the women pressed her palm gently to Valeria's chest, right above the heart. A single beat passed. Then she turned and left without a word. The litter waiting outside was flanked by 2 praetorians in full armor. Their expressions did not change when Valeria stepped forward, her mother behind her carrying a bowl of burning hyssop leaves. The street was quiet, too quiet. Rome, normally pulsing with gossip and cart traffic, had stilled for her passage. The emperor's orders had cleared the path. Doors were shut, windows covered. But in the shadows, faces peeked through lattice and curtain. Older women crossed themselves. Some turned away entirely. Not one man dared look. As the litter moved through the forum, Valeria kept her gaze on the silk walls around her. She knew where they were taking her. Every noble girl did. The Domus Augustana, the emperor's private residence, a place where rituals were held behind stone and secrecy. She had heard stories none told in full, all passed in fragments. A cousin who returned with a new necklace and haunted eyes. A senator's daughter who vanished after her inspection. A slave girl who said she saw one of them taken down a corridor and never brought back. When they arrived, Valeria was helped out of the litter by an older woman dressed in black. Her head was shaved. Her hands bore the inked symbols of priestly office. She did not smile, but she nodded once, then turned and walked without waiting. Valeria followed her through a bronze gate, into a courtyard where no birds sang. At the center stood a great marble hall. Its columns reached like arms toward the heavens, each etched with depictions of goddesses offering gifts to emperors. But no men were shown kneeling, only women. Inside, other girls waited, 12 of them, some younger, some older. No one spoke. They were not allowed to. A brazier burned at the center of the room, its smoke rising like a warning. This was the chamber of purity, and no girl who entered left untouched by its silence. They made them kneel. 13 girls in total, lined shoulder to shoulder on a polished slab of red-veined marble. The floor was cold enough to numb the skin, but none were allowed cushions. They were told the gods favored endurance. Before them, incense spiraled upward from a golden bowl, the smoke mixing with the heavy scent of cedar oil and old blood. No sunlight reached the room, only torchlight, flickering from bronze sconces shaped like outstretched hands. A circle of columns enclosed them, each carved with the faces of women from centuries past, blank-eyed, open-mouthed, frozen in an expression no one could name. A woman in priestly garb moved silently around the room, inspecting each girl. She was old, maybe 60, her back hunched and her eyes sharp as obsidian. Around her waist hung keys, dozens of them jingling softly like wind chimes as she walked. She said nothing, but from time to time, she would stop and adjust a girl's posture, pushing a spine straighter, turning a chin upward. When she passed Valeria, she paused, a long pause, then placed 2 fingers beneath her jaw and tilted her face toward the torchlight. Valeria did not flinch. She only hoped her heart would stop pounding so loudly. When the priestess reached the center of the room, she raised one hand. 2 younger attendants emerged from behind a curtain, carrying a long wooden box lined with scrolls. The ritual was about to begin. Each girl would be named not by their given names, but by the names of their fathers. Valeria became daughter of Marcus Metellus, holder of the eastern grain port. Another became daughter of Gaius Severus, consul of the northern legions. Their identities were reduced to their father's usefulness, their worth measured by the reach of a man's hand. A scroll was read aloud. Its words were ancient, older than the empire itself. It spoke of purity, of divine favor, of the sacred duty of Roman blood. But beneath the poetry was something more primitive. The girls were not here to be blessed. They were here to be evaluated. One by one, they were called forward to stand upon a raised stone, arms at their sides, eyes cast down. A curtain to the left of the hall concealed the emperor's panel. No faces could be seen, only faint outlines, shadows behind silk. The girls were instructed to walk in a circle, pause, then kneel once more. Some were asked to lift their arms, others to turn slowly. Valeria counted the breaths of each girl, listening for trembling. When her name was called, her father's name, she rose on unsteady legs. The priestess beckoned her toward the platform. As she stepped into the center of the hall, the firelight caught her eyes. She dared not look toward the screen, but she could feel them, eyes that weighed and measured, that did not see a person, only a selection. She stood still. She did not tremble. She did not speak. But inside, something cracked, and it would never grow back whole. The room shifted when he entered. No doors opened, no horns sounded, yet every girl felt it. A stillness swept through the chamber like a held breath, and even the torches seemed to dim. Somewhere behind the silk screen, a bell was struck once, soft and hollow, and the priestess bowed her head. "He is watching," she whispered. That was all. Valeria remained on her knees, but her body tensed, as if every limb remembered something it had never known. Her pulse slowed, her stomach hollowed. The emperor had arrived. She had never seen him in person, only glimpsed statues and coins that bore his likeness. A god in marble, all cheekbones and laurels and perfect symmetry. But the man in the shadows was not marble. He was real and alive and entirely unseen. Behind the screen, she could make out the faintest movement, the tilt of a head, the shift of weight, the slow rhythm of breathing. She knew he was not alone. The panel of elder men was with him, advisors and augurs cloaked in red and black. No names were spoken, no greetings exchanged. This was not court. This was ritual. The girl to Valeria's left was summoned first. She rose clumsily, stumbled, caught herself. The priestess frowned but said nothing. The girl walked to the center of the room, removed her ceremonial veil, and turned slowly as instructed. Her voice was requested, but nothing came out. She was dismissed. Another followed, then another. The pattern repeated. Walk, turn, kneel, show the hands, speak, if told. Be silent otherwise. Some were given longer glances. Others were waved away before they finished turning. Valeria watched them disappear behind a bronze curtain once their inspection was complete. She did not know where they were being taken, or whether they would return to this chamber or be moved elsewhere. No one explained. Silence was part of the ordeal. It was not enough to observe the ritual. One had to endure it. When her turn came, her legs obeyed, but the rest of her felt far away. She walked to the center stone, lifted her chin, and let the torchlight find the side of her face. Her hands remained at her sides, her breath shallow. A voice from behind the screen spoke not in command, but in observation. This one does not tremble. The priestess looked toward Valeria, her mouth neutral. Do you speak? Valeria opened her lips. No sound emerged, not from fear, but something colder. She could not offer her voice, not here, not to them. A pause, then a murmur behind the screen. A man laughed, short and low. Let her be marked, another said. The priestess stepped forward and tied a length of blue silk around Valeria's wrist. The meaning was not explained, but she knew what it meant. She had been chosen not for blessing, but for something else, something waiting beyond the curtain. By morning, only 10 girls remained. 3 had been taken through the bronze curtain and never returned. Their names were not spoken again. Their sandals, which had been left beside the brazier, were gone. The priestess did not acknowledge their absence. Neither did the attendants who returned to rewrap the girls' veils and rebraid their hair. The fire had gone out sometime during the night, and the room smelled of cold ash and sweat. No one had been allowed to sleep. Not truly. They had been told to kneel, then to sit, then to kneel again. Every movement became ritual. Every silence stretched like thread pulled taut over a blade. Valeria sat apart from the others, her wrists still marked with the strip of blue silk. No one told her what it meant. No one dared ask. She had not been taken behind the curtain, but neither had she been dismissed. She remained between 2 worlds, observed, but untouched. When one of the attendants offered her a fig and a cup of watered wine, she refused it. Her stomach could not hold anything. She knew now what this was, not a ceremony, not a test, a sorting, like livestock, like marble blocks to be chosen for carving. When the sun finally rose, another scroll was read. This time, it was brief. 3 names were recited, each followed by a title of honor, chosen for divine instruction, chosen for sacred isolation, chosen for the emperor's grace. These titles meant nothing. They had been invented to conceal the truth. The girls who bore them would vanish from the world of women. They would not marry. They would not bear children. They would not speak again in court or temple. They would belong to the emperor. Valeria's name was not called. She did not know whether to be relieved or ashamed. Her father had sent her with hope in his eyes. He had imagined land grants, tributes, elevation of status. What would her return mean now? That she had failed to impress? That she had resisted too visibly? Or perhaps something worse, that she had come too close to being taken and was spared at the last moment? The priestess approached her once more. She cut the silk from Valeria's wrist without a word and handed her a folded strip of linen. You are dismissed, she said. Return to your family. Do not speak of this night. She was led to a litter waiting at the palace gates. Her sandals, still pristine, were set beside her like relics. As the litter passed through the silent streets of Rome, she saw her reflection in the polished bronze shield of a guard. Her face looked older, her mouth drawn, her eyes hollow. Her family would receive their reward in coin and title. But Valeria knew what had truly been traded: her silence, her memory, and the part of her that would never quite return. The ritual was never spoken of again, not in the halls of her family's villa, not in the murmurs of the servants, not even in the whispered prayers her mother offered each night beneath the statue of Juno. The day after Valeria's return, her father received an imperial decree granting him new land near the coast and a seat on a lesser magistrate council. He toasted with wine and declared it divine favor. Her mother did not drink. She watched Valeria with quiet eyes and never asked what had happened. She already knew. All Roman women knew. Years passed. The blue silk ribbon had long since turned to dust, but Valeria could still feel it tight around her wrist, marking her like a brand no fire could burn away. She married, as expected, a senator's son, kind enough, ambitious enough. She bore him 2 children, kept the household in order, spoke only when spoken to. But some nights, when the fire grew low and the house fell silent, she would stand by the window, her hand resting unconsciously on the spot above her heart where the priestess had once pressed her fingers, as if checking whether it was still there, whatever had been taken from her. The chamber of purity was never mentioned in public records. The emperor who had summoned her eventually died of fever in his sleep, and with his death, the ritual dissolved into rumor. Future emperors favored spectacle over silence. They built amphitheaters, not secret rooms. But in the shadowed corners of noble households, mothers passed down quiet instructions to their daughters. Never speak too boldly. Never rise too high. And if the imperial seal ever comes for you, remember, beauty is not protection, it is bait. Valeria's own daughter turned 13 in the spring, a quiet girl, full of questions and poetry. One evening, as they walked through the peristyle garden, she asked her mother why she never wore jewelry. Valeria smiled and said only, "Some things are not for display." She did not tell her about the chamber, or the incense, or the way silence can feel like drowning. But when her daughter pressed, asking if the emperor had ever sent for her, Valeria's hand trembled ever so slightly as she tucked a loose braid behind the girl's ear. "No," she whispered, "but I knew someone who was." And in that lie, there was a mercy. She would not pass down the memory, only the warning. In time, her daughter would become a woman. In time, the empire would find new ways to dress violence in ceremony. But for now, they walked in peace. Among the laurels and fading light, between silence and survival, and in the stillness, Valeria made a promise to never forget the girls who were taken, to never let the ritual become myth. She was never meant to be remembered, but you remember her now. If you believe stories like Valeria's still matter, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which state you're watching from. I read them all.